we're going to go back to the coast of Asia Minor. And this particular coast has a name. This map is a nice map because it just shows you the divisions of the Greek city-states. And when you look at the map, you realize that the mainland of Greece really just continues all the way over to the coast of Asia Minor because there's so many islands. So if you think about it, it was very easy for Athenians to move across the Aegean Sea and come closer and closer, and then finally settle on the east coast. It was very close. It was very easy to get to. You didn't have to travel very far in a boat to go from one island to the next, and then settle down. So the colonization of the coast of Asia Minor was relatively easy to have that happen. Now remember, keep in mind, Asia Minor is the empire of the Persians. So on the face of it, in 600 and 500, the emperor of the huge Persian Empire would say, Asia Minor is mine. I govern it, I control it, but I'm allowing those little Greek city-states up and down the coast to stay there. And maybe he collected taxes, and maybe they paid them, or maybe not. Changed over the period of the years. But it is on the mainland of an area that is part of the Persian Empire. So there's always tension. There's always tension between the refugees, we can call them that, who've come from the mainland and settled and built cities and grown, and the Persians and the Persian Empire. And so that's the background. Now, our map here just shows you all those islands that go all the way over to Asia Minor. And now let's just put up this nice map. It's a very, very, very good map. And I want to give you a term. It's the one that we use for this area. We use it all the time. And so it's nice to know. It's called the Ionian coast of Asia Minor, or the Ionian Citystates. And the reason it has this name is, this is the name of the old Greek dialect that was part of Athens and brought to this coast by Greeks who migrated over. So the language was the same as in Athens. And so it was the Ionian dialect. So that has come to be the way that we refer to this part of the Asia Minor coast and the city-states that are part of this coastal area. So, for example, at the very top is Troy. So way up there, Troad is the name of the area of Troy. So at the very top, closest to Europe, closest to the Dardanelles, is Troy, the historic Troy. Everybody knows that. And then further down the coast is Smyrna. That's Homer's city that we talked about. And Colophon, a great book-making city, and that name has come down to us for various imprints. A lot of publishers have used that word. Then Ephesus, which is there, and you can visit some of the most interesting ruins of the whole of Asia Minor. Samos, which is a spectacular island just off the coast, very close. Miletus, and Halicarnassus. So those are the places that we're going to be talking about in the next few minutes, because this is where Greek science is born. This is the place within the larger Greek community. Remember now, there are lots of Greeks living on the mainland, lots of different Greek cities, city-states, and the Asia Minor coast. And I keep saying Asia Minor because I don't want to say that word that starts with T, but I don't want to say it because as you all know, the Greeks and the Turks do not get along. So the Greeks do not want me to say that their city-states are in that place that has the T. So I'm not going to say it because they won't like that. And of course, in the year 700 BC, it wasn't that place that we're going to eat on Thanksgiving. It wasn't that. So we don't have to use that word. So we say Asia Minor. The Ionian coast of Asia Minor. That's the way to talk about this. The Ionian coast of Asia Minor. This is where all of Western European science is born. From a number of individuals and a number of places and over a period of time. But to get started here, we just want to talk about Thales of Miletus. Miletus is one of those cities I just showed you right here, right down here. And so Thales of Miletus is often described as the first scientist, or the beginning of Western science, or Western philosophy begins with Thales. That's Bertrand Russell, the great philosopher. So Thales is 624 to 546. So in other words, after Homer is in the 700s, so this is the same coast, this is the same part of Greece, and therefore it's the same creative culture that resides on this coastal strip. Very active commercially, very successful in traveling around the eastern Mediterranean as salesmen and sellers and buyers, import-export. Very well informed on the eastern Mediterranean, including Egypt and Israel and Gaza and Syria. And very well informed on languages, so often multilingual. That's another thing that helps them. And very, very active intellectually. Now, you know that because we've already talked about this is the place where Homer and the Homeric epics are born. So you already know that. You already know that within the Greek world, there's something special about this coast of Asia Minor. And probably it has to do with being a refugee culture. It probably is very similar to the American culture in 1620 and 1680 and 90 and 1700, that it was new, building something new, lots of coming and going, lots of importing of ideas and books and all kinds of things, and it was probably very similar here. You have about a dozen cities in this strip of the coast in which great ferment, great exchange, great travel. So here's our first scientist, Thales of Miletus. First thing that's interesting about Thales is that he was not just a philosopher. He was an active politician, knew a lot of the other political leaders of the time, might have been engaged himself in constitutional reform and constitutional research, knew the most famous lawgiver of his time, Solon, S-O-L-O-N, corresponded with him, maybe met him here on Asia Minor. And so he's actually active in all kinds of fields. He was a very shrewd investor. And he followed the weather. He was a student of meteorology. He was already collecting tables and things on weather. And so he became aware that a season was coming when there would be a huge production of olives based on what he'd studied in the weather. The next season was going to be a huge season of olives. So he took out futures. That is, he leased. So it was like the futures market. He took out futures on all the olive presses in the area. And when the olives came, he got rich. Don't you love that? No? You don't love it? I love it. I love it. Don't you? I mean, this is a philosopher who, rarely. He is one of the Presocratics. And we use that term in general. It's a nice, easy way to refer to all these philosophers. In other words, the period of Greek philosophy before the high golden age in Athens. So the Presocratics. And there are about a dozen names that would all be within the Presocratics, and he is one of them. And one of the things that you can see on the screen is that the Presocratics begin to ask questions about nature and begin to create explanations with the gods left out. That's the key point. For the first time that we know about, whether it's Sumerians or Assyrians or any of the other cultures or Egyptians, now we have thinkers who propose some kind of solution to some kind of a problem with the gods left out. Now you have to think about that. That's a very major intellectual step. And therefore it means that at his time, between 600 and 500, Greek culture is beginning to think about nature and beginning to think about nature as if one might be able to study it and extract information about it just on the basis of observation, just on the basis of observation of the phenomena that you would see. So in order to do this, you would collect information about weather, you would collect information about astronomical changes, you would collect information about the moon. Think of all the different things, astronomy, geography, all of these different things were beginning to be seen separate from some divine explanation. Now, it's just the beginning, but it's a key 300 years, from, say, 600 down to 300 Aristotle. It's in those 300 years that Western philosophy begins to create the cornerstone of Western philosophical speculation, in which, step by step, philosophers think and say more and more about nature with the gods left out. They're asking questions: where does everything come from? From what is everything created? How do we explain the plurality of things? How might we describe nature mathematically? And almost all of these philosophers are going to do the same thing. They're going to follow Thales in attempting to provide explanations for the ultimate substance. And don't get hung up on that word substance, because they don't necessarily mean material substance. They mean the most elemental, quintessential center of all being, whether it's material or not. So Democritus will say that it's the atom, and that's a good theory, and eventually that will be a cornerstone of Greek thinking. But at this point, there are many different suggestions, and they're all slowly rejecting the mythological explanations. They're slowly moving to other ways of explaining things. And Thales is the one who will use geometry and other calculations to think about the height of the pyramids, to think about distances across the sea, and as a result, he's hailed as the first true mathematician and the first individual to whom a mathematical discovery has been attributed. And this is it, Thales' theorem. You may have studied it at some point. Remember now, all these theories with different people's names attached to them will be handed on, and then they will appear again later. And certainly Thales' ideas are going to be handed on into the 400s and the 300s and the work of Aristotle, Plato, and then Euclid and Ptolemy. They are the high point of this. So his theory states that if A, B, and C are points on a circle, where the line AC is the diameter of the circle, then the angle at ABC is a right angle. So there it is, simple. Now I know you say, well, sure, everybody knows that. Yeah, thanks to Thales, we all know that. We've had 2,000 years to get used to it. That's a right angle. And of course, once Euclid assembles all these ideas into his book, then everybody knows it. Thales thought that water was the essential constitutional, essential element of all of the universe. Other people will suggest other elements, fire, which equals change, air will be suggested by others. But they are all looking for something with which to explain the whole of the universe. That is an explanation that would not have to go to Zeus or Hera, or Zeus mad at Hera, or Zeus and Hera mad at each other. And so then they get into an argument and they create the world. You see, he wanted something other than that. And so that's what he was going to consider. So Thales of Miletus, 624-546, is the beginning of Western philosophy.